Cattle Show.
What's happening? A happy hump day to you and yours. Thanks for joining us. As always, it is very much appreciated. And I say us because I have a special guest today. This man truly doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to introduce him. He is a craft beer savant who helps me with some of my selections every once in a while. He is a world traveler who went to Mexico recently and then went to Indianapolis to cover the Combine. He is from The Athletic, writer extraordinaire, Mr. Jeff Howe. Jeff, thanks for joining me today, my man.
Too kind of you. Too kind. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's jump right into this because people, they don't want the pleasantries, quote unquote. They want the football talk, Jeff. So let's start with Kyle Dugger. He got the transition tag yesterday. What have you heard about that decision by the Patriots?
I mean, honestly, they've been very quiet about all their decisions this week. I think I would assume there was maybe some there were some ruffled feathers with how much information escaped last week. So I wonder if that's led to them quiet everything down a little bit this week. But you can only read between the lines. There's some obvious thoughts that you have. I mean, me personally, with the transition tag with Dugger, you're keeping him within a market rate for that year. I mean, if you put him at the franchise tag, like, it just doesn't, nobody is going to give up 2 first-round picks for a safety. So you take that negotiating window completely off the table. Right now, the Patriots want somebody else to do their negotiating for them. And if Dugger accepts something, the Patriots can decide whether or not it's the right fit. Otherwise, you have him at a number that doesn't severely hamper or kind of filter over into other areas of your roster. But I thought it was interesting just because I thought Mike Onwenu would take precedence there. And I mean, he plays a position of severe need for the Patriots. If you lose him, you know, now you're looking at adding one more body to replace him. And I don't know why you would want to be comfortable. I don't know why you would be comfortable with that strategy. So again, I'm not reporting anything here, but my assumption is they should, I would think, feel optimistic that they can get something done with Onwenu before he goes to the open market.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. You know, does the tagging of Dugger in this way tell us that they might have an Onwenu deal coming down the path here and they could be close? But let me ask you this, because I know Mike Giardi, I saw him last night, Jeff, on NBC Sports Boston, saying that Onwenu, he wants to play guard. Could there be a situation here where the Patriots are looking at Onwenu and saying, look, Big Mike, if we're going to give you that kind of money that you want, it's going to be at tackle. We can't pay you like that as a guard. And Onwenu is drawing the line in the sand. Is that a possibility here?
Well, if that's the case, that's going to restrict his market with everybody. I mean, I don't know that for sure. I'm not saying that's right or wrong or whatever. I just don't have that info. But let's jump off that premise and say that is accurate. I mean, he's leaving a lot of money on the table because we've seen him play a damn good right tackle in his career. He's also played guard extremely well. I mean, he's going to be successful no matter where he plays, but teams are much more willing to give out an absurd amount of money to somebody who can play in the end of the line as opposed to the interior of the line. So, but hey, you know what? If he's more comfortable, if he thinks he's going to have a longer career playing guard than tackle, then, you know, eventually maybe that money all sorts itself out. But I think, if you're the Patriots and you want to invest heavily in him and he wants to be paid, let's say like a top 3 guard, then maybe it would make sense to let him go and see what he can get.
I want to go back to Dugger for a second because I know you brought up an interesting point. I was reading your piece this morning in The Athletic, and we're talking with Jeff Howe, obviously. And I was reading that, and you made a point about Dugger, and I think this is an important point. The transition tag, it leaves the door open for the Patriots to possibly play some games, right? With the right of first refusal, they can play around a little bit with the timing of this.
Yeah, because, you know, the safety market is – look, you want good players at every position. Kyle Dugger's a good player. There's no denying that. But the safety position as a whole is just not a premium position. Like if you're going to overextend at a position, it needs to be at tackle, wide receiver, cornerback, and then obviously quarterback. So that kind of leaves some wiggle room with the other positions and how you want to allocate your resources. Now you look at the Xavier McKinney is going to be another
right.
highly sought after safety. But if they go, if a team is going to say, all right, day one of the legal tampering period, which is Monday, we know that's when a lot of these business deals really get done. I mean, all the quality free agents are going to be agreed to by probably lunchtime on Tuesday. So these teams want to know, all right, am I going to put out a big amount of money to McKinney and know I have my guy by Monday? Or do I want it agreed upon by Duggar on Monday, but not really executed until Wednesday? And then give the Patriots the opportunity to say, well, hey, I want to use my 5 days to figure this all out. Now, who knows? Maybe the Patriots will say, all right, I get it. Like, you do you, go on, have a great career, all the best to you. They want to be nice to whoever signs them away. But that team could say, well, I've got my resources tied up in this guy for 5 days, and now I invest heavily somewhere else while that process drags out.
It's a great point by you, and that's why I wanted to circle back to it, because I do think it can't be overlooked. The transition tag gives the Patriots some options here to prolong the process, which really damages another team's ability to get the deal done and move on to other business. I thought it was a fantastic point. All right, while we're talking with Jeff Howe, don't forget, do us a favor. Take a second of your time and just click that thumbs up on the YouTube channel that you're watching. If you like the podcast, enjoy what we do here. The community continues to grow, trying to hit 2,250 subscriptions by next week. Free agency, we can do that by you liking, commenting, and subscribing. Make sure you subscribe, but every thumb counts. So like us on YouTube, Facebook, and, of course, Twitter/X, whatever we call it. All right, Jeff, I want to ask you about Elliott Wolf. He's obviously responsible for these big decisions that are going to be made, right? The Duggar decision, Owenu, etc. Now, reportedly, Andrew Callahan wrote this, a friend of the pod. He wrote over the weekend that Wolf and most of the front office, they're on lame duck contracts. What have you heard about the present and the future of Wolf and the rest of the guys in that front office?
Well, it's common practice around the NFL to have the personnel executives' contracts expire after the draft. So let's call it May, usually,
right,
give or take. And that's so they can get all the important offseason decisions done and taken care of. They obviously work on a different schedule than, the players, the guys on the field, the coaching staff, and all that sort of thing. So that's not atypical. But I can say with a great deal of confidence that the Patriots are not going to go through Gerard Mayo's first month as a head coach and then free agency and then the draft and then say, all right, that's it. Now it's Gerard's team. You put everybody else in place. Like, that just doesn't make any sense. And I think you can look back at, I think we've probably talked about this before, but like when they made the decision to immediately promote Gerard Mayo, like, you knew that whoever was going to be in charge of the front office, and I thought Elliott Wolf was a tremendous choice, was the best choice among the in-house candidates, whether it was going to be Wolf or they wanted to go with like a former Patriots executive like a Dave Ziegler or a Bob Quinn or Lipford, or go on down the line. You wanted it to be somebody who was aligned in the same vision as Gerard Mayo. You don't want to bring in somebody that he's never worked with before. Then you invite a power struggle when there's adversity and what have you. And if one guy wins, then all of a sudden you're staggering coach and GM, and then there's that search, and then things get messy. And the next thing you know, you turn into a dysfunctional franchise without even trying to, because those are the things that bring franchises back several years. So that's all of those reasons are why I think continuity will remain in place.
Yeah, man, I find it hard to believe that Alonzo Highsmith would take a gig, move away from his alma mater, move up to New England from Miami. Beautiful, right? Miami's beautiful. Make that move to work for a few months. And then when the draft's over, it's like, all right, Elliott and Alonzo, thanks for the work that you've done. All right, well, we're going to get into the draft. Obviously, Jeff was at the Combine. He's talked to a lot of people. He wrote a tremendous piece after leaving the Combine on the quarterback situation, how those QBs are ranked and all of that. We're going to get into that with Jeff. But first, let's get to our sponsor. The Nick Cattle Show is brought to you by First Class Glazing. Elevate your bathroom experience with First Class Glazing, where they specialize in luxurious bathroom renovations and bathtub glazing. We're talking expert craftsmen dedicated to delivering top-tier results using premium materials and precise techniques to create a space that exudes sophistication and charm, like the room that Jeff is sitting in right now. You can visit First Class Glazing online at firstclassglazing.com or give my guy Jose a call, 617-849-0513. That's 617-849-0513. And I always talk about how you can support this podcast. You can support it by liking, giving us that thumbs up on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter/X. You can also help us out by commenting and subscribing to the channel. But you can also help us out by checking in with First Class Glazing. If you need your bathroom done, check those guys out. And if you mention this podcast, you can get a free estimate plus 10% off. All right, Jeff, let's get into the draft now. You reported at the Combine that the Patriots want to draft a quarterback at 3. Now, some people have said that, people are reporting that the Patriots are going to do this. They're going to draft a quarterback at 3. I read your report differently. I read your report as, well, that's what they want to do, but not necessarily what they will do. And also others have followed saying similar things as you, Jeff. Mass Live, meanwhile, reported that the Patriots are planning on drafting a quarterback at number 3. Where are the Patriots in this process, gathering information? How do they feel right now as we sit here on March 6th?
I think there's an extremely strong chance they take quarterback at 3, and that's what I would predict. That's what I have been predicting for the last several days. And I almost never operate in absolutes, and I certainly wouldn't do it with the draft. And here we are, I believe, 50 days out. So, there's a lot of stuff that can change. I mean, you never know how an evaluation could change, a random injury, what happened. Things could happen off the field. Whatever. Somebody could just jump up and say, hey, here's 4 first-round picks, and now you're going to move back to 12 or something like that.
Yeah.
So, look, I think the way I tried to make sure that I worded it correctly here was the way that people who are very familiar with their evaluation process, the types of quarterback attributes that Elliott Wolf and that front office and the way that teams around them or high up in the draft, I should say, are sort of mocking their own draft boards and trying to figure out what they think the Patriots will do. So there's a strong belief around the league that the Patriots are going quarterback at 3. And I think there's good reason for that. Now, we've sat here for months and months and months talking about how great Caleb Williams and Drake May were. And they were supposed to be the top 2 picks in the draft. And I still think it's going to turn out that way. And then it was, honestly, in December, that's when somebody started telling me, all right, look at Jaden Daniels. He's probably a top 12 to 15 pick. And we'll see, maybe his ceiling gets a little bit higher if somebody gets antsy. And now it's, there's a lot of people who are really riding that Jaden Daniels train. And it's, I was curious if Jaden Daniels' frame, now he didn't measure at the Combine, which I thought was going to be fascinating, but we should find out at the pro day or the top 30 visits. Teams believe he was going to be 6'3", a tick north of 6'3", and then somewhere closer to 200 pounds than the 210 that he's listed at LSU, whether that's going to be 198 or 205 or whatever. And maybe he didn't do the Combine measurables just so he could add on a few extra pounds of muscle before he weighs in at the pro day or whatever. So I was curious because I've been told for so long, when you're drafting a quarterback in the Northeast, whether it's an AFC North type of team or New England or Buffalo, you want somebody with a big frame and a big arm who can throw a ball that can cut through the wind and those elements in December and January. And I was curious, okay, well, where does that leave Jaden Daniels and the Patriots if he's sitting there at 3? And I was told by what I think was everybody I asked, you know what? He's got too many other positive attributes. Don't worry so much about the frame. Now, he's being compared very frequently to a Lamar Jackson running style. He just is not as physically well put together as Lamar Jackson. I don't think people give Lamar enough credit for how tough he is and how much bigger he is, how much more difficult he is to bring down. And I was talking to somebody today who compared Jaden Daniels' running style. This was on a radio show. Somebody was comparing it to a Johnny Knoxville style, and you got to limit those big hits. You can't be taking those at an NFL level because your body is your investment, and you can't be missing games. You can't be missing large stretches if you're a franchise quarterback. So you got to learn when to say when to slide, how to preserve yourself. You don't want any undue injuries. But that's a very long-winded way of me saying that there are 3 really good quarterbacks right there, and the Patriots just so happen to have a top 3 pick, so they should be in good shape regardless.
From what you've heard, at 3, more likely to be May, more likely to be Daniels right now?
I think it's more likely to be Daniels. I've heard this is not coming from the Commanders. I don't want to represent it as such, and I think I've done a good job of that over the last week. But people around the league believe the Commanders are high on May, and the widespread belief is Caleb Williams is going to go 1. That leaves May for the Commanders at 2 and Daniels for the Patriots at 3.
All right. Another question about this quarterback thing. Your understanding of this, Jeff, speaking to people. Patriots, as you put it, extremely strong chance that they draft a quarterback at 3. Is that because they love all 3 guys available? Is it because it's almost a matter of convenience? Why would they say in early March, that's where we're leaning heavily? Is it due to just, hey, we love all 3 guys and we have fallen in love, and that's what you do. If you love a quarterback, you draft that quarterback.
Yeah, that's my belief. When you start reaching, especially in that area of the draft, like if you're taking a guy just because you like him or you want him to be good, that's when you set your franchise back 2+ years, usually a lot longer than that. So this isn't about saying, okay, I thought like when Mayo told, and I forget who, I might have made this mistake with you earlier, but he told somebody after his introductory press conference, it might have been WBZ, I forget, but like we're going to draft like a player to a very important position. And I was like, all right, well, let's pump the brakes on that. I thought a lot of people assumed that meant quarterback, just because like you need a quarterback, you're going to take 1 at 3 just because that's your biggest need. Like that's when you run into mistakes. I also thought at the same time, well, you know what a position of need is? Like we've already talked about it, offensive tackle and wide receiver. And there are 4 to 6 can't miss prospects combined between those 2 positions that they could take right there at 3 or trade down if they want to. Their options were wide open. The reason why I've started to buy into this QB buzz with the Patriots is because there's a genuine belief that Daniels belongs among that top tier. And there are some people who think that Daniels is a notch below that tier of Williams and May. And I've talked to people who believe that Daniels is the better player than May and the better prospect than May. And because he's got a higher trajectory based off of how much he's improved over his last 2 seasons at LSU, and the belief that that will continue once he gets into an NFL team that can keep developing him and keep him on that path. So that's why I am high on the Patriots taking a quarterback at 3. If I thought that, you could get Daniels at 10, or, if you wanted to get aggressive and trade back to 7, then I would be like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe this hasn't been as well thought out, or maybe this isn't the best strategy because you're bypassing. You can't take a quarterback just because you need one. You have to take the right guy, and you have to be committed to developing him.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And supporting him. Support him and develop him. Take care of the quarterback. And Jeff, I've said that one of the positives I've seen with this staff being built is that they have a number of guys on this staff that respect the quarterback position, appreciate the quarterback position. One guy has played that position at the NFL level, an AVP, and they certainly seem like they get that you've got to, not only draft the quarterback, but develop that guy and support him. All right, I'm going to continue with the conversation about the quarterback position. We'll talk about Michael Penix because some people are wondering about Penix. I thought what Jeff wrote about Penix post-combine was very interesting and differed from a lot of what I've seen. We'll get to that. But first, don't forget, take a second of your time. You're watching us. You're enjoying this. Give us that thumbs up. More likes means more eyeballs. We build the community. That's how we do it. More people are gathering in this family. I love it. I support all of you guys out there in your ventures. Hopefully you support mine. So don't forget to give us that thumbs up and subscribe. Trying to get to 2,250 subscriptions by next week during free agency. We're about 80 away, so we're getting close. So don't forget to like and subscribe, rate and review. And one last thing, Patreon exclusive content starting on Monday, March 11th. I'm launching a Patreon page, exclusive content, 1 podcast per week, ad-free, mailbag, Q&A session twice a week. We jump online and we hang out. So check it out, patreon.com/Nick Cattles. All right. Michael Penix, Jeff. A lot of people say, oh, Penix improved his stock at the combine. And I know there are a number of Patriots fans. There's a contingent that say, don't draft the quarterback at 3. Draft Marvin Harrison, circle back, and draft Penix at the top of round 2. I found what you reported to be interesting. You reported over the weekend that the belief is that Penix will be a fringe. He's a fringe 2nd/3 round pick. I haven't heard that many places. What are people saying to you about Penix?
So he's a really fascinating story because he is 6th among the top 6 guys in that class. And there's a pretty big disparity between 4 and 5, which is McCarthy and Nix, and then 6, which is Penix. And it's changed a lot since the national championship game, which is unfortunate for him, but you kind of see why. He elevated his stock a ton last college football season. I mean, I saw a handful of his games, so I was able to kind of speak somewhat educatedly as I make up a word while trying to convey how smart I think I am. So I was able to say, hey, you know what? Like this throw, that throw, this game, like he played well in the clutch. He's got a great arm. Delivered the ball with accuracy. He liked everything he did for Washington. He played against some quality teams in a fairly tough schedule. I thought a lot of those teams out west were pretty solid this past season. But then in the national championship game, so actually as that was kind of happening, and then he delivered a great performance in the semifinal. And it was like, okay, my goodness. And I tweeted this, this is a guy who was really soaring into the top half of the second round. And I had somebody say right around that time, a team could get desperate enough to move into the top of or the back end of the first round because they don't want to wait all day Friday and let somebody else outbid them for the 33rd pick.
Right.
And I was like, okay, that's interesting. That came from somebody I trust to a very high degree. And then the national championship game happened, and the Michigan pass rush was all over him. It caused a lot of his mechanics to wane, the footwork, the accuracy, especially on some balls that he just consistently over the course of the season hit with regularity. And he was soaring passes, like he was just all out of sorts. And it was okay. Well, when he's under duress, his process fails. And then he was taking that beating. And you saw over the last 2 or 3 series of that game, like he was really laboring to get off the field. And that brought up the fears of the 4 season-ending injuries, including the torn ACLs. Now, he left that game, I believe, unscathed on a grand scale in terms of no major injuries. But you wonder, when the pass rush bears down on him, what is going to happen and how difficult is that going to be to fix? Or do teams look at that and say, hey, you know what, we got our guys in place, we can fix that, no big deal. He'll watch for a year, he'll learn, he'll be a good backup, and then eventually his time will come and he'll be more ready. And maybe that's the case. That'd be terrific because he's such a cool story. But he sort of slid back to some of that original prognostication of mid-college football season of a guy who, yeah, maybe his ceiling is in the second round. And if things, sort of fall apart completely, maybe he falls into the early third round. And I don't know. I mean, when you start talking about that area of the draft, you talk about a McCarthy or a Nix, and you say McCarthy could go anywhere between, let's say, 4 and 12. That's not that wide range. When you're talking about Nix, maybe it's between 12 and, I don't know, 28. The range sort of widens.
Right.
You start talking about the second or third round, you're talking about a span of 45 picks.
Yeah.
And it totally depends on how a team evaluates them and whether or not they are comfortable enough that they won't get jumped by the time they're on the clock next, into how high they could realistically go.
All right. I'm going to squeeze some extra time out of Jeff today. I'm going to push the boundaries here today during this podcast. Might push him a little beyond 30 minutes. But before we get into free agency, because we still got to hit free agency, Jeff, I know you got a fundraiser coming up. It means the world to you. For a minute or so, tell the people about the fundraiser and how they can help, my friend.
Yeah, thanks. And don't worry about keeping me long. I tend to be a little long-winded. I do it to myself. But wearing the One Mission hat, again, I think anybody who's familiar with my work on Twitter, you've seen how much work we've put into this stuff at One Mission over the last, this is now year 3, or I guess 4 if you include the 2020 Twitter push that we did. But One Mission's a foundation that's become near and dear to me. Through almost complete coincidence in 2022, they reached out and helped me as in my post-surgery recovery from thyroid cancer. And I had what was, I guess, best described as survivor's guilt. And they kind of got me through some of the mental hurdles of that challenge of overcoming cancer and all that entails. But One Mission's work is to help kids and the families who are going through a cancer diagnosis. And they do so much work for, whether it's paying for a parking ticket at a garage or just going into a room and bringing like a bag of toys or princess dresses or things for the family, or if the child has a sibling who is also kind of going through this and isn't sure of how their world just got turned upside down. They're trying to brighten their day in whatever way possible. And one story that I heard a couple of years ago at the One Mission's Buzz Off at Gillette was a mother went up to the director of One Mission and she just covered a $10 parking garage pass and said, she broke into tears and said, this meant the world to me. And in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about $10, and this is for a parking pass. But to this mother, to her, it represented the fact that she's in a cancer diagnosis with her child, and a community rallied together of people who, now it didn't take a community of people to raise $10. It probably took one person, and maybe it was a fraction of one donation. But there were a lot of strangers who at some point donated money. And now all of a sudden this money is redirected to this family. And it represented to her and her family that they're not alone. And I think that's what's so important. And, I'm not like necessarily One Mission's target demographic here. But as we were talking, I said, hey, you know what? I'm kind of going through some stuff. And immediately they had a couple of people on the phone with me to try to help me through my own sort of situation. So I appreciate you bringing it up. It's fundraising season for us once again. We've got we've got our team back together. We're up to 8 people. We're playing in the Golf Fights Cancer Golf Marathon in June, and play 100 holes. We're trying to raise as much money as possible for One Mission. We've had 2 incredibly successful years, but then in the middle of all that, April 28th, we are having our big fundraiser at Wamisit Lanes in Tewksbury. We're going to start really making a push with that in terms of social media in the very, very near future, hopefully by the end of this week. So you can get the details on how to get in, but it's going to be a day of bowling, arcade games, golf bays, and some really, really cool stuff in the auction and raffle section. Last year we had some unbelievably cool gear, and had a lot of people come out. It was incredibly successful. So we would love to have you out at Wamisit Lanes, April 28th, if we can. If you can't make it, I tweet out the link all the time. The tweet is pinned on my Twitter profile on how to donate to our team. But honestly, every dollar counts, and it's so important to so many people.
And that's at Jeff P. Howe on Twitter if you want to check him out to see how you can donate if you can't be there in person. Again, it's One Mission. Great work from Jeff. Great work by everybody out there at One Mission. And April 28th, you can watch the draft. You can hang out, see what the Patriots do, and then head on over to Wamisit Lanes and help Jeff for a very good cause. So be on the lookout for that stuff. Let's get back into free agency. Your buddy, Chad Graff at The Athletic, he reported that Baker Mayfield was not interested in signing with the Patriots. And I think all of us expect Mayfield to be back in Tampa. But here's my question for you, Jeff. Let's say hypothetically, this is just hypothetically, Baker Mayfield was interested in signing with the Patriots. Would he have been plan A, or would plan A would have been still, you know what, we're better off just sticking and picking at 3 at that position?
I believe plan A was draft all along. And, over the weekend, I noted how, yes, the Patriots are high on Baker Mayfield. There's been a lot of crossover between him and people in Cleveland, and there is a mutual amount of admiration and respect for Mayfield and Mayfield for the Patriots. Remember, they had a pre-draft meeting with him back before he went number 1 overall, just in case he was going to slide down the board a little bit. So it's been sort of a long-standing relationship in a way, I guess you could say. But you look at, like, also mutually, the Patriots are sitting there at 3 where they can draft a guy. And Mayfield is probably going to get a Daniel Jones caliber contract, 4 years, $160 million, give or take. And, that's an extreme amount of money for a team that is probably in the early stages of a rebuild. And then you look at it from Mayfield's point of view. I mean, this is a guy who has, I think I got the numbers correct here. In 6 seasons, he's had 6 offensive coordinators and 8 head coaches. So relocating yet again when things went well for him in Tampa, I don't think that's high on the list of priorities. Plus, he would do it for a rebuilding team. When Tampa, you have a chance to continuously compete in the NFC South, and they surpassed expectations even last season. So I think consistency is the key for Mayfield. Relocating yet again for a team in the early stages of rebuild just didn't make a whole lot of sense. But again, as I don't like to deal in absolutes, and this was one where I was not trying to couch it when I tweeted over the weekend, never say never, because things could fall apart. Let's say Kirk Cousins' market takes a team that Mayfield might have been interested in out of the mix, and hypothetically, like let's say Cousins leaves the Vikings and the Vikings sit there and say, well, you know what, maybe we don't want Mayfield either, maybe we want to go the draft route, and that leaves him with potentially New England, or New England competing against the Raiders and the Broncos, and the Broncos don't have a great cap situation right now, so that reduces the market. So who knows, like in the unlikely scenario that 1, 2, and 3 happen, and then all of a sudden Mayfield comes back and says, oh my goodness, like this isn't how I envisioned it, everything sort of fell apart, the plan fell apart, and these teams are going to go the draft instead of the veteran route, maybe I do need to take another 1-year deal. I don't see it happening that way, but it would be a long shot. I just the respect is there. It doesn't seem like the right fit for both sides.
A lot of people are watching this podcast right now. We appreciate you. And I would especially appreciate if you gave us that thumbs up. Quick like. I know I say it multiple times during the pod, but it's all about the algorithm, folks. Trust me. It's not about my ego and wanting more likes. It's just the algorithm. More likes, more comments, and subscribe. If you can subscribe, that would be fantastic. Patreon page, exclusive content launching on March 11th, this coming Monday. I think I'm going to do a special Monday night free agency podcast exclusive to Patreon members. So it's patreon.com/Nick Cattles. Let's play a little bit of a fun game here, Jeff. And I know writers, some of y'all don't like the idea of just throwing stuff out there, but this is fun. We're framing this as fun. This is not gospel. This is not Jeff speaking to sources unless he wants to tell us. But let's look at other veteran quarterbacks, okay? So Mayfield, he's out. Cousins, let's say he's out. Let's play the percentage game, 0 to 100%, okay? I'm going to run through some veteran quarterbacks, and you give me the percentage of the likelihood of them being a New England Patriot, all right?
Yeah.
All right, let's start with Gardner Minshew, percentage, 0 to 100.
30.
30%. Okay, so not likely. Russell Wilson.
0.
This is
yeah. I don't see that one happening. That's not a good fit.
I would tend to agree with you. I'll say this. Jeff doesn't have to say it because I don't know if Jeff has heard it the same as I've heard it. I would just say I've heard some things about Russell Wilson and how he carries himself that would make it very difficult for me to believe he would be the right guy with a young team walking in after a 4-win season. I would find it very difficult.
I would say again, assuming you're going quarterback at 3, that's a player who, barring a disastrous training camp, needs to be your day one starter. And I don't think mixing Russell Wilson and everything that he's accomplished in his career, and then sort of some of the doubts and the uncertainty that have been created over the last 3 years, I don't know if that's a great backup quarterback situation for a rookie.
Joe Flacco.
51%.
51%. All right, and everybody's going to know this name because everybody's been talking about him.
40%.
What was that?
40%.
Jacoby?
Yep, there we go. I educated guess. No, I mean, I think in terms of those 3, like those are the 3: Flacco, Brissett, and then maybe Minshew after that. I mean, I think Flacco is everything you want in a backup quarterback, assuming you get that rookie at 3. And then just seeing what the success he had with Cleveland last year with a similar offense. I think that's an absolutely ideal scenario.
All right, couple more for you, Jeff. Let's continue to talk free agency because I've got 2 or 3 more questions. Let me first ask you this one out of those 3. Obviously, lots of offensive holes. Again, your buddy Chad Graff from The Athletic has reported that the Patriots might have to overpay for upgrades. What would be reasonable expectations, Jeff, for Patriots fans? What should they be expecting on Monday and Tuesday? Legal tampering begins. Is Calvin Ridley somebody like that? Would he be reasonably on the radar, or do you anticipate a little bit less below that range?
That's a tough one because Ridley. So we'll back it up. Tuesday, franchise deadline day, was a bad day for teams that need a veteran wide receiver. Not
Yeah.
good at all. Now you're stuck with Calvin Ridley, who I think is a really good player. I saw him in person in Jacksonville at camp last season, and he sticks out when you see him on a field. And that's on a field with some other good wide receivers. That's a very quality player. I'd be surprised if Jacksonville let him go. I know they're high on him. I know they want to keep him. But then you go to Hollywood Brown and then like Gabe Davis and Darnell Mooney. And it's just, you're talking about like a situation here where, last year the Patriots gave up on Jacoby Myers for Juju Smith-Schuster. And you're talking about $11 million a year or whatever that wound up being. I mean, now you're talking about like $9 to $12 million players potentially creeping toward 14, 15. If you're Calvin Ridley, it's free agency. You're going to have to pay number one money for a number two receiver. Maybe ideally Calvin Ridley's a number two somewhere on a solid team. He would be your number one in New England. If you're comfortable going $20 million a year, look, you've got to make strides on offense. And I'd be okay with that. I think taking a swing like that, I just don't know if because he is most likely head and shoulders above all the other options in free agency, like does 20 all of a sudden creep toward 25? And then you say, all right, how much is too much? I mean, if you're going to overinvest somewhere, certainly look at Ridley. Due diligence is extremely important at that position. Give him like all your attention. Don't necessarily overpay for the rest. If you can get those guys at reasonable money, again, some of those lower tier players, reasonable money, and you have confidence that they fit your system and you can continue to develop them, then hey, you know what? Go for it. But be realistic. If you're going to overpay anywhere, you got to fortify that offensive line.
I'm with you on Calvin Ridley. Callahan, Kide at the Boston Herald reported that the Patriots are going to target an elite, quote unquote, an elite defensive player that could immediately start. Let me ask you, Jeff, could Wolf and Mayo spend more on defense than some of us might anticipate?
Well, I mean, you would trust that Gerard Mayo would know exactly what he's doing in terms of who he wants to add on defense. And again, I really do respect Elliott Wolf's eye for talent and how he can build a roster. I know he's unproven because this is the first time he's really leading a department, but I can't overstate it. Like everybody who knows him or has worked with him has a high level of admiration for Wolf. So it's just, how much are you willing to spend when your offensive line is in shambles and you don't have the skill players around? And like, you need to make sure, like when you say draft and develop a quarterback, like I really think that has gotten so overlooked in terms of like the mainstream outlook. Like you have to surround a young any quarterback. I mean, look what happened to Brady his last year with Tampa. Bad offensive coordinator, bad system, a lot of faults around him.
Yep.
Like the greatest player of all time looked pedestrian because there just wasn't enough around him. You want to accelerate that by 1,000,000 miles an hour, you put a rookie quarterback in a bad spot, he's going to look bad. I mean, look at what happened with Bryce Young last year compared to CJ Stroud. Stroud was in a better position. Stroud is probably a better player at this point. Not going out on a limb there. Like, obviously he had a vastly superior rookie season to Bryce Young, but you've got to make sure that you develop these guys. So if you put Daniels or May in a situation where he's running for his life because the offensive line isn't blocking, you heighten the injury risk, you accelerate the clock in the head, you could set him back by a considerable amount, and that does nobody any good.
Completely agree with you. All right, let's run through rapid fire. I got 5 questions from people that have been throwing them in the chat. Run through these quickly, and then we'll let Jeff bounce because, man, oh, man, did he tell me a story before this podcast about his travel from Mexico to the Indy Combine that would have your head spinning. Let's go to Rob D first. So, Rob D, $100 million, and they're acting like they are in cap jail. I'm not feeling great about their lack of activity with their own players. Jeff, your thoughts?
I mean, I think that's hyperbole. you've still got to be smart with the money. But look, I mean, let's give him a chance to kind of get through this week. If they lose Nwenu and they lose him on an affordable contract, like similar to like the Jacoby Myers situation, hammer him. Absolutely. You can't lose good offensive linemen when you're already sort of at a negative position to begin with.
I want to ask you about Highsmith off of this. Where are my entertainers? I heard Highsmith referred to as the king of the combine. I liked the sound of that. Just your thoughts, because we spent a lot of time on Elliott Wolf today, obviously, for good reason. But just your thoughts. What have you heard about Highsmith and what he's going to be doing here?
He knows everybody. I mean, the king of the mayor of Indy, the king of the combine, whatever you want to call it. I mean, he's a guy who has made a lot of relationships around the league. Everybody knows him. And yeah, I mean, he's highly regarded around the NFL. He's got a good personality.
All right, let's go to DH. Now, Jeff is not necessarily Dane Brugler here for The Athletic, but he wants you to maybe name a couple people, wide receivers, second, third rounds, maybe guys that grabbed your eye, Jeff.
Look, I'm not going to blow smoke. I'm not anywhere. Like, go read Dane. I'm sorry. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I am well established here in the second and third round receivers or anybody at any position. Like, I'm pretty comfortable with the top 10 picks and then the quarterback tiers. And I'm not going to sit here and be like, well, you know what? Tez Walker got a bunch of hype at UNC. Like, he should be the pick there at 52. Like, I'm not going to lie to you guys. You deserve better than that.
All right, and I wanted to bring this one up from Roll Pats just to get your thoughts on this guy. He is in the NFL. Gabe Davis. Roll Pats likes Gabe Davis more than Ridley. I don't, but Gabe Davis, would that name make sense?
Look, good player. Absolutely. He's been productive through stretches in Buffalo and probably has a bit of untapped potential because, you know, you're coming from that offense and maybe you get him into a different type of system. And certainly he could explode. I wouldn't be shocked if Gabe Davis gets $15+ million a year for all of those reasons. It's a big projection. You need to make sure that that money is invested wisely and you put him in the right fit. Like again, like teams are going to spend more than they should on free agency, which is a tale as old as time. You just need to make sure that when you spend that much money on a position like that, it's the right fit for your offense. Otherwise, you get yourself into a ton of trouble. You know, you spend a gajillion dollars on Kenny Golladay if you're the Giants, and you know, just because he was productive in one system doesn't mean he's going to be productive in yours. And I'm not saying Gabe Davis is going to be a bust. I certainly don't want that to be conveyed in that way. I'm just saying, like, Gabe Davis could be number 2 on a lot of receiver draft free agent boards. But does that mean you need to pay him like a number 1 when he might be better suited in like the 2B sort of range, if that makes sense?
And I think the other part of the conversation, of course, is the draft, right? Like if the Patriots are looking at this and they say, okay, Calvin Ridley, immediate upgrade, somebody who is better than the guy that we can get in the second or third round, fourth round in year 1. You start looking at Gabe Davis and you wonder, okay, you know, am I going to get similar production from a Jalen McMillan if that's who we want out of the draft? You know, those guys in the second and third rounds, are they more closer to the kind of production that Gabe Davis might give you? And is it really worth paying $15 million a year for a guy if that gap is not significant between someone like him and someone in the draft? Rob D, Super Chat. Thanks, Jeff and Nick. Great show. Insight as always. I will split this with Jeff. I will spend $2.50 on the next craft beer that we have together. So that's what I'm going to do for Jeff, just for sitting with us here today. We have a lot of people watching, and it's mostly because of Jeff. The man is popular. He's good at what he does. Check him out at The Athletic. Check him out on Twitter/X, Jeff P. Howe. Don't forget, one mission. Look it up. Check out Jeff as he tweets information out regarding the fundraising venture for One Mission. It's a very important thing to Jeff. They do fantastic work. When I'm out at Lanes on April 28th following the draft, so you want to take a look at that. Jeff will have all of the information again on his Twitter/X. So if you follow him, you should be good on that side of things. For me, all I want is a thumbs up. Give us that like. More likes means more eyeballs. Comment, subscribe. Also, a Patreon starting on March 11th. You can sign up for that right now. Exclusive content for you from yours truly starting on Monday. And rate and review if you've been listening to us on Spotify and Apple Pods. All right, that spiel is done. Jeff, any final words for the fine people in New England and outside of New England who happen to be Patriots fans?
No, I'll jump off on sort of the last question about the wide receivers. Even though I can't give you specific names, like generally speaking, I know I know it's like not necessarily the case with New England over the last 24 years or so, but like you can get quality receivers in the later rounds. And there's a that's a position where it's like offensive tackle, which they desperately need. Like in order to be confident on the tackles, like you need to take one in the first round and more often than not, like the top half of the first round. Whereas wide receivers, like that's a position, especially now where there's so much more talent, like an Amon-Ra St. Brown in the fourth round or whatever. Like there's so many examples like that of guys that you can hit on later as long as you focus on the right attributes and you know that this guy is going to be good in your system and can sort of develop over the course of time. Like these rookie receivers, like I don't want to say they grow on trees, but like there's a dime a dozen or whatever. But like if you stick to your scouting formula and you're confident in the fact that your coaching staff can get them in a position to succeed, like you can get those guys just about anywhere. So it's not easy or whatever. I don't want to make it sound like that. But, if the Patriots don't get, if they go quarterback over Marvin Harrison in round one, and I totally get the fascination with Harrison, that'd be a really, really fun pick. But that doesn't necessarily mean whoever they get in the second or third or fourth round or what have you is not going to pan out. It's a new scouting formula that they're putting in place. I think it will be closer to the one that they had in 2021. And, we'll see. I think they have there are areas where you don't necessarily need to press if you don't get the guys you want in free agency.
And if you look at history, Elliott Wolf, history in that Green Bay front office, they hit on a number of receivers, a number of them after the first round. So we'll see if Elliott can do that here in New England. All right, he's Jeff. I'm Nick. We gave you a lot of information on this thing. We, as in Jeff. I didn't give you much info, honestly. I just asked the man questions. Hopefully you enjoyed our time together today. He is not going to do the pod tomorrow with me. I am going to do the pod solo, so that'll be fun. 11 a.m. tomorrow. If something breaks, we'll do a breaking news pod like we did last night for Kyle Duggar. You can check that out on the channel. But until next time, for Jeff, I'm Nick. We appreciate every single one of you for joining us. Till the next time.